What's going on, everybody? This is Tactical Grizzly Bear, and today I have the honor and privilege to interview the Chief of Police of my hometown, Piqua, Ohio. So, first and foremost, I'll allow Chief Jamison to introduce himself and the Piqua Police Department.
Okay. I'm Bruce Jamison, and I'm Chief of Police here at Piqua, Ohio. We're a town of about 20,000 in western Ohio, north of Dayton. We have about, right now, we're authorized for 31 officers. That's down from 40 just 5 years ago, total employees. So we've been hit hard by the recession, but we're still plugging along. Crime hasn't stopped, and neither have we.
Awesome. The premise of this interview is we met up on Facebook, basically. I mean, I've known you pretty much my whole life, 35 years, and we kind of rekindled our relationship through Facebook. How long has the Piqua PD been on Facebook?
We started up in about 2011, I believe, and we just kind of did a soft approach to the thing, as I was calling up our page while we're talking. Didn't make a big to-do that, hey, now we're on Facebook, and just kind of grew into it, and also with some guidance from whenever there became available some good information from the International Association of Chiefs of Police to help kind of guide that. Because when we first started, there was still a lot of skepticism in especially authoritative positions, you know, that Facebook was just some kind of fad or a kid thing or something. So figuring out how to make it, you know, truly an effective means of communication was a little bit of a sell job at the beginning.
Well, I think maybe you kind of answered this, but why did you start using Facebook, and what do you actually use it for?
Well, as I mentioned, we've really dropped down in staffing, and so the first couple years that I was chief, I basically said, you know what, we don't have time for PR stuff. The guys are too busy handling calls, and so we had to really back off a lot of our already established community engagement mechanisms. But in a way, well, then after a while, I just started noticing even a police department needs to be able to help people see them in the right light. You know, if we just leave it to everybody else's devices, it's going to be negative because we're involved in so many negative activities. And what people mostly see, our proactive stuff, sometimes has to be secret, you know. So even if we're being proactive, the community doesn't see it. So I was beginning to see our reputation slip, and said, boy, we need to do something. And this is a much, things like social media have been a great opportunity to get our message out, and including getting it to the people that we really need to target. Talking to a senior citizens group about scams, for one, gets old, and for number two, is frequently not very effective. And that's the kind of stuff we were still doing because it was so hard to say no to those established groups that we know like us, you know, so we want to go and tell them something. But as far as that really accomplishing very much in the way of crime control or crime prevention, it didn't. It was a feel-good thing. So, yeah, social media lets us get out even to people that don't like us, and that's fine because we end up engaged in some really good conversations that can mold our reaction or be able to really see what the entire community is looking for from their law enforcement agency.
Awesome. You know, like we've talked back and forth with the Facebook thing. I see, you know, you put up tips. I mean, even for Black Friday, you were putting up tips on Facebook. I mean, it's not just a law enforcement perspective. I mean, you're taking it to the level of, you know, at least helping people out. Someone's out there on Black Friday, you know, shopping and they happen to check their Facebook on their mobile phone and they see a tip from you and they're like, oh, you know what? I should be doing that.
Yeah.
You know,
so you know why we did that.
yeah, exactly. So I think that's really great. I know that you have put up some things about what's going on with Piqua as far as the, the crime side, I guess, of it. Have any crimes actually been solved through any kind of tips that have flown through Facebook?
Yes, definitely. Or at least they've helped with an investigation to let us say maybe there's times that we might throw somebody's picture on there and we've got a pretty good feel for who it is. But hearing it from a bunch of community members really helps because you can have somebody dead to rights on video and show it to them, you know, and everybody in the room knows that's that guy, and he's still sitting there saying, no, that's
I think there's been a couple Walmart instances where you put up surveillance pictures and ask people, you know, hey, does anybody know, you know, this face and things like that. So
my favorite one was at Labor Day. Right before Labor Day of this year, we had a shoplifting. A guy threw a bunch of beer in a shopping cart and just headed out the door of a grocery store. So we throw a picture of him going through the exit doors. And, you know, the one thing with social media, even something like a police department has to figure out what kind of personality, you know, they want to put out there. And we've chosen, you know, a little bit of humor is fine, you know, and helps people see our human element. But not quite to the point that there's another chief in Ohio that's really popular, you know, kind of as a commentator on all of social issues around the country, you know, and that's not what we've chosen for our department, but that's pretty cool that he does that. But I just posted one time, I thought, oh, one of the officers wanted me to put this on Facebook. I'm the administrator right now. And so she had sent me the photographs, the images to post, and I just thought of it Sunday morning. Oh, I need to do that. So I'm thinking real quick, I'll throw it up there and see what happens. As soon as I post it, and I put a little caption, you know, did you have to pay for your beer this weekend? You know, this guy didn't.
yeah.
And that was my first caption. Then I was going to follow up with some more serious stuff. Before I got my second post posted, somebody got on there and said, that is so-and-so, and named him. I was walking in the store about the time that picture was taken and spoke to him and told my husband, I'll bet he didn't pay for that beer.
Man.
So that gave us a real life witness. And by the end of the thread, it was a hilarious thread. It was just all kinds of stuff happening in there.
I've made some particularly funny comments on some of them.
Yeah, you contribute a lot of times. Yeah. But in this one, the bad guy ends up getting on there, you know, and it's another kid I've known, not for the same reasons I've known you for so long, but I've known him since he was a kid. He's a young adult now, and there ends up a conversation between me and him about how he could turn himself in or come talk to the officer, you know, right on Facebook.
That's actually amazing that the criminal himself actually went on Facebook and started talking to you.
Yeah.
Now, what was it? It was a little bit over a month ago. It was maybe a month and a half ago. There was an incident. Now, I want to be perfectly clear about this. It wasn't an active shooter, all right? But it was shots fired in the vicinity of a school.
Right.
What can you tell us about that?
Okay.
Without giving too much information, obviously, but what happened there?
We've actually had two incidents this year. The most recent one, we applied some of the things that we learned from the first one, but the first one was just some gangbangers deciding to try to impress each other or scare each other or whatever, or shooting off a gun. But it was only a block from a school that was in session. And everybody dispersed quickly, and we had we knew there's a possibility that the guy with the gun was in one particular residence. It's more of a garage. So before we went in there, we put a school on lockdown. But in the case you're talking about, we had domestic situation, and a guy fired off a gun in the direction of his girlfriend. Again, just pure stupidity. No intent to kill her, but an intent to scare her. And so he's in enough trouble, for that. But he had disappeared before we got there. And we thought we had the guns involved, but she says he has a couple guns. And this was literally 3 doors away from the school. So the first officers on the scene put the school on lockdown. And the one thing we have learned from just the previous one is, if we can, to get an officer into that school as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And so this was a small-scale incident. When you're talking like active shooter, there's a big scale. We don't have room for that. But here's, we're looking for one guy that left one house, and he's on foot somewhere in this area. So we were able to get some officers into the school, have them on lockdown, just to keep them safe during that time period. And this school had already been through quite a bit of training. We've been changing the way we want our schools to approach active shooters, but also things, like this. And so there was things like just plain language over the PA system to try to keep the kids from getting scared, but also let them know it's time to be careful. The police are here in the building, but they're also looking for somebody outside of the building. There's no threats here right now, but we need to go on lockdown. Which is one of the things we're encouraging, instead of this is a level 1, or this is a level A, or this is a code red, or things like that. So
now with these procedures that you're doing, these are pretty much new procedures, or have these
relatively.
been?
I first heard about them in 2004.
Okay.
And liked them, but it wasn't the time to implement them then, including the fact that we could no longer have things that already started kind of crumbling as far as our staffing way back then. And we were pulling officers out of the school district. And so we did have officers from another agency that were able to cover a lot of things like this, training and stuff. And they weren't, here yet. But the big difference is convincing people you can run for your own life, and you should do it. Whereas for years we've been telling them, lock down, stay put, we're going to contain things, and then we'll come in and save you. Now we're acknowledging we're probably not going to get there in time. The vast majority of active shooter incidents are over before the cops get there.
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw this on Facebook too, not on Piqua PD, but some people have posted that the average active shooter, I mean, it's over with in like 7 minutes or something like that, and it takes the average police officer to get to respond to that 8 to 10 minutes.
Right.
So yeah.
But something clicked with Newtown, the Sandy Hook, and all of a sudden people were willing to listen to, is there a better way? And so in that first incident I told you about with the gangbangers just firing a shot in the air, we had a teacher that had already been through part of our training, not even the entire thing, but one of the things they do is not just hide in a corner, barricade their rooms. And this teacher started doing that, and she told her class, now listen, we're going to keep you safe, but if a bad guy gets through here, you guys go out the window, and I'm going to get him with these scissors. And if she had said that 2 years ago, I think she would have been crucified.
Yeah.
But again, the social media comments related to that, a mother posted a very emotional comment about that, and the fact that this teacher was willing to do this for her kids. And it got a wonderful response. Not without some controversy, but yeah.
I'm going to pause because I only can put up 15 minutes, so I'm going to pause right here, just give it a second or two to kind of like a lull, and then I can edit the last part and then start basically a part 2, basically. So.
Okay.
Yeah, Okay, now with these procedures that you're doing, I mean, is there any special training involved where you're actually sending officers to other places because other police departments are training in this or anything else like that?
Yes, we've been, and it's pretty available. The training that we're using to teach to the schools is called ALICE, and a lot of people have heard of ALICE. It's become very popular. That's the one that I told you I heard about in 2004. And it got big on college campuses before secondary and primary schools started getting serious about it. So we sent a guy off to learn about ALICE and become an instructor. And they're very open on take this back and make it work in your community. So it's not a prescribed, if you don't do step number 3, you can't dare call this ALICE. You know? But we don't reference as ALICE. It's just our plan. And we have a wider plan called Protect Piqua, and it's part of that. And we're teaching run, hide, fight anywhere. Factories, offices, wherever it might be.
Okay, so this is actually spanning more than just schools. I mean,
Yes.
you're going even with just businesses and stuff like that, which I think that's actually a great thing. I mean, you know, active shooters, you know, for the most part, you see a lot of schools, but I mean, there's been malls and there's been, you know,
Right.
other places too that they don't just hit the where the kids are and stuff.
Right.
So
Yeah. It's in factories. Matter of fact, I quit going out and teach at factories on workplace violence because the best practice and the kind of state of the art at that time of what was expected to be taught was lockdown, you know, hide. And I just had too hard of a time of telling people in a factory because probably they're going to it's going to be an internal thing a lot of times in a factory. So whatever you train everybody to do, your future bad guy, you're probably also training your future bad guy.
and that
So
seems to
if
be
we say, everybody run into this room where there's no exit, but just run in this room and hide and call the police, by the time we get there, that guy knows where they're at too and could easily do a lot more damage than, you know,
you're really
otherwise.
with that. You're really informing the person, even if at the time he has no intention. But then
Exactly.
later on, you know, he becomes angry and distraught, and then wants to go into that factory where he works. He knows exactly the procedure that is happening, and when you lock down and people hide underneath a desk, he knows. Look underneath the desk.
That's right.
You know, so.
Yeah.
Now with the schools, there's kind of two parts. I kind of changed this question here. Is I know the high school. The high school has a resource officer. He's there when not anymore.
No, we haven't
used
had
to.
one for a couple of years. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
but I understand obviously because of budget cuts and everything else, and how many schools does Piqua actually have? There's no possible way that you could put an officer in every single school or anything else like that. But are there any instances of the schools or the teachers, the school officials arming themselves or taking classes to arm themselves?
There are, and part of our security measures on that is not to give any specifics on that.
Okay.
But what I am saying is, again, for our Protect program, every facility needs to decide for themselves what is their approach to weapons on campus. Because in Ohio, they can make their own decisions. However, even though the law might let them, insurance companies have some pretty strong opinions on this.
That seems to be a problem too. Is that you can't just go with what the police department says. You know, oh yes, that's okay, or even the Board of Education. Yes, we agree with that because then, I mean, there's so many different other things that'll get in the way, and
Right.
insurance companies, you know,
Yeah.
is one of them.
Yeah. So we do approach any school that comes under our Protect program and is willing to work with us has at least addressed that, and they have shared with us what that policy is. But what I can say is there's more trained, armed people in our our schools during the school day now than there was a year ago.
Okay. Now, with that school lockdown, what I saw on Facebook, I read a lot of the comments. There was a little bit of backlash with the parents with that. I mean, it wasn't an active shooter, but it was shots fired. The school was locked down, and a lot of the parents seemed like they were upset with the police department because they weren't notified. I put my comment on there that I thought was, kind of telling people, listen, I mean, if the police department and even the school board called every single parent while it was happening, you would have 150 parents down there, okay, and then the police department wouldn't be able to do their job, all right, and
Yes.
security area if they had to take care of the parents who were trying to rush in to get their child or anything else. So what steps are possibly being taken place to kind of ease the parents' mind, or at least to inform the parents when situations like this happen?
Right. A couple of steps. Our whole change in philosophy hasn't sequenced maybe in the ideal way, but we've gone for the most important things first. So like I said, I sent an officer away to learn about Alice. I've got our officer, one of our firearms instructors, sent away to a course on a new way for us to approach as the responding officers. And we just completed training around with the entire department on what's called a single, I'm dancing around it, but it's no secret as I think back on it. It's a single officer response where in Columbine we contained and waited for a SWAT team, and then we learned that's not a good idea. So then we taught cops ways to go in with 3 or 4 officers in a mini tactical team. And most recently we've decided, you know what, first guy on the scene, if he doesn't hear sirens squealing right behind him, but he hears shots going off, he's going to go get that guy. And so they have the training in that now. We've gotten the teachers trained, and including we're implementing what's called threat assessment teams as a proactive thing. But then beyond that, we need to train the community. And we haven't had time to do that. That's kind of further down the list. We're hoping in early winter or late winter we'll be able to do that. But in the meantime, that's an advantage of social media and people like you getting on what you posted on there to the other parents, what ended up the prevailing opinion. Everybody come on board, and in fact, one of the first ladies that I didn't fault her at all. People worry about their kids.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's perfectly understandable.
Yeah.
As I was trying to ease the tension, I think I was one of the first ones to actually say, I mean, the police department has to do their job,
Yeah.
and if they announce out to everybody, that makes their job a lot harder.
Exactly. So that ended up being the prevailing opinion in that first poster that posted something that really wasn't all that bad, but it was critical of us.
Oh, yeah.
She removed her post.
Oh, she did?
Yeah.
Well,
It's like there was no need to do that, because I love watching discussions like that unfold in social media. I mean, that gets the meat and potatoes. Instead of me just saying, by golly, I've been to school and I'm a cop and here's what I think, and thinking everybody's just going to accept it. That's a real mishmash of all kinds of different people and ideas, and definitely by the end of the thread, there was a consensus on what's the right thing to do, with a couple people saying, well, I don't care what you say, I want to know immediately. But, well, the trouble with that is if that was the community's opinion, we'd probably go with that, but it would probably mean a lot less lockdowns.
Yeah.
And if a lockdown is making the kids safer, why would we want to discourage police and schools from doing that? Just because we wouldn't be able to meet the expectations whenever we do.
Yeah. Any future plans in progress to train or inform or better prepare for this situation? I mean, you've talked about Alice,
Yeah.
and obviously you pretty much answered this question already. But,
Well, I can give some specifics because
Okay.
even since we first started talking about doing this interview, we've gotten the funding. We've found a good forum that we're going to be, I think in the first week in March is what we're shooting for, just a school safety day for parents. And I'll tell you what's the one thing, working with educators on this, which is important to do, because a lot of these decisions are the school's decision, not the police department's decision. But they get discouraged by calling parent meetings and nobody showing up. And so we're hoping that this is hot enough of a topic that they will, you know. But what we'll be talking to parents about is when you get this this text from your kid, because that's what's been happening lately. And in fact, sometimes parent response can interfere. It is so quick, it interferes with first responders. So we're going to be training people. For one thing, we're taking some measures with mutual aid and stuff and automatic plans to do a perimeter much more quickly. So we need to educate the parents that you might come flying out there, but guess what? You're not coming to your kid's school. And I understand you're panicked. You want to go help your kid, but we're not going to let you in. And so let them know that ahead of time, though. And also let them know, but here's what we're doing on the inside, and we're working on our ways to get your kids back to you in the safest and quickest way possible. And here's some things we can tell you about that. But again, we can't tell them everything about that, or we're training future bad guys on our plans.
Exactly.
But I think the vast majority, whenever they hear that we're thinking about it and we have plans in place and this is what we're going to be working on, and what they need to do is listen for where's the community rally point for this incident. And as soon as they hear that, go there. And that's going to be a place that's also police protected, but that's where they can go and plan on reunification with their child.
I think they implemented that in Colorado. One that just happened last week is I think some of the parents ended up at the school, but there was a church that they designated to take all the children to, and that was the place where all the parents were to show up and you know meet back up with their child. Real quick too, you mentioned the child might have a cell phone and they're texting their parents and everything else. You know, again, technology it could help a lot because, in all honesty, sometimes it's the child or the student or whoever's involved in that active shooter scenario that makes the 911 call. You know, I mean, they're one of the first ones to do that. You know, so I mean, as far as technology there, I mean, it helps with getting the officers there as quickly as possible. But then you run into the children who are contacting their parents, and then you have the problem with the parents.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. To end this interview, I just wanted to know how many veterans are on the Piqua Police Force and how many of them are Marines.
Okay. We have, you warned me you were going to ask, so I counted 4, 6, 7 veterans, and 2 of them.
7? How many? Who?
As far as sworn officers, right now we are at 28.
28. I think that's pretty good. 7 veterans out of 28.
Well, and we just gave a test, and we give preference to veterans on the test, 10 points, which is more than even state law requires. And so you can see in the results after they get sorted after the veterans points are added. I'd say we're looking at 15 people, not to hire, but 15 candidates, and I'm thinking 11 of them are veterans, including the number 1 guy has done 3 tours, pretty fresh out of 3 tours in Afghanistan.
Nice.
So this is getting them into the best position to say, okay, just because you are a veteran doesn't mean you get a job, but it really is a good system for getting us those good candidates at the top of our list.
I got about 20 seconds left before I have to start a new video. So thank you very much, sir. I appreciate the interview. You know, like I said, the very beginning of this is that, you know, this wasn't to to put any bad news with the police department. I see the Facebook and I see the great things that are happening. So
Well, thanks for your interest.
thank you.